In April 1997, Camilla Carr and John James set off from Bath as volunteers in a 500 larder, stacked high with toys, games, footballs, paints and a parachute. Their destination was Chechnya, and their aim was to work with children who'd been traumatized by war. After working for 2 months setting up and teaching in a rehabilitation centre and watching the children begin to smile and play again, they were kidnapped by Chechen guerrillas. There followed 14 months of incarceration in homes that varied from a concrete box with no natural light or fresh air to a pink trompe-l'oeil bedroom via a sauna and various cellars. They experienced everything from rape and mental torture to occasional moments of compassion and kindness. They survived by using tools such as Tai Chi, yoga, meditation and humour, and through creating a dialogue with their captors. I remember following this story closely as Camilla and John happened to be friends or friends of my family. Years later I had the pleasure of meeting them myself, at which point I learned that Camilla had written a book about the ordeal, one which was recently selected as Radio 4's Book of the Week, in fact. Having read it, I particularly remember one of the worst parts of the kidnap, in which she and John were imprisoned in a dark, hot cellar for days on end, with no window or door, entirely at the mercy of the Chechen terrorists who, often either absent or drunk, may or may not have opened the trapdoor above to deliver food. Camilla describes how she and John would take it in turns to stand on some old crates in the corner of the cellar to reach a small gap in the wall higher up. When they placed their eye to this, they found themselves looking out on a rough, messy, overgrown outdoor space behind a shabby house, some distance away. In this space were some hens, and Camilla found that to look at these birds, sometimes for hours at a time, going about their scratching, pecking and clucking, brought her a much-needed sense of peace. She was able to see, through them, that there was life outside the cellar walls. She was able to see something of normality from this picture. Her book, an obvious reference to these days, is called The Sky is Always There. Father Simon recently talked about the art of seeing in one of his chapel talks. He recounted how, in his visit to a Buddhist monastery, he learnt a lot about meditation and, as he put it, seeing more than just the mundane. On one evening, for example, he noticed a picture in the refectory of the monastery in which a wine glass full of wine also displayed a reflection of Jesus Christ's face. An example, as he understood it, of how the mundane, the glass of wine, could link us to the divine, to God. He mentioned that it's easy to look around and just see things on a surface level. This got me thinking about the ways in which we see and how what we choose to see can have a profound effect on our thoughts and our experience of life. I linked what he said to Camilla and John, to the crack in the wall and the hens. Clearly, on a basic level, seeing is about surviving. Our eyes are fit for the purposes of being human, just as the eyes of a gecko enable excellent colour vision to spot the tasty insect, and those of a zebrafinch are able to see ultraviolet light, helping this little bird find the perfect mate. But the subject starts to become more interesting when we consider other aspects of seeing. For one thing, there is a huge variability in sight between one person and another. The wide spectrum of colours, for example, that different people will see in a piece of fabric could be a whole topic of conversation in an art class. And even without being colour blind, as we term it, people experience the intensity of colour in the natural world very differently. Incidentally, did you know that colourblind people were used by the RAF in World War II as they were better at spotting the hidden enemy tanks, supposedly camouflaged in forests? Fascinating too is the interplay between the mind's interpretation of what is out there and the subsequent ability of the eye to see what is out there. Take, for example, Ebbinghouse's illusion, and we learn that in certain instances the brain interprets physical cues wrongly, and our eye therefore sees wrongly. The orange dot is of course the same size in both images. The moon on the horizon also appears much larger to us than the moon in the sky, because the horizon provides depth cues which the brain can interpret, whereas outer space does not. We all know, of course, that the moon is always pretty much at the same distance from us, no matter what our mind tells us. And depending on which side of the image we focus on, we either see a rabbit or a duck, even though the image stimulus remains the same. In fact, the drawing was first used in 1899 by a psychologist to make the point that perception is as much a choice as anything else. We see things then not necessarily as they are, but as our mind tells us they are. If there is an objective truth to the form of things around us, then we don't always see it. This must be in part what the Belgian surrealist painter Magritte was angling at when he so famously suggested, "This is not a pipe." If what we see is always an interpretation of our mind, even at a very physical level, then this gives us great freedom. Crucially too, as Camilla's story and Father Simon's meditation illustrate, the mind is malleable. We can influence it, and in choosing our input, we can radically alter our vision. Both literally and metaphorically, seeing depends on the workings of the mind. The eyes are the window to the soul, said Shakespeare, but could he not have said that the other way round? We see the world primarily as we are, not as it is, and therein lies our choice, perhaps even our responsibility. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, look upon such things. Here, the Bible's wisdom on how to live a rich and fulfilling life makes the link with what we choose to look at. In secular terms too, there's plenty of advice on how to make life's experiences better. Always look on the bright side of life. Do you see a glass half empty or a glass half full? Or, according to Snoopy, keep looking up. That's the secret to life. Camilla and John, in the darkest days of their lives, when their fear must have been indescribable, chose not to stare at the concrete dark void of an overheated cellar somewhere in the North Caucasus of far Eastern Europe. They found a fragment of light in a wall through which they gazed on life. They chose also to see beneath the masks of fear and anger that concealed their captors, and in so doing reached a small flame of love and laughter, unquenched by the demonizing nature of war. My question then is very simple. Where do we choose to cast our eyes? And what do we choose to see?